The plane vanished without a trace, swallowed by the vast, frozen wilderness. There was no warning. No final goodbye. Justo then. Violent lurch. Thin darkness. Daniel awoke to an eerie silence. The world outside the shattered window was a sea of white. Snow fell softly, blanketing the twisted metal carcass of what was once a plane. It cut out, his voice swallowed by the immense quiet. No answer. He was alone. He checked his phone. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, the battery icon glowing a menacing red. 7%. No signal. He shoved it deep into his pocket, a useless brick that held the ghosts of his last conversations. He stumbled through the wreckage, a surreal graveyard of luggage and lost lives. There were no other survivors. No food. No supplies. Just the biting, relentless cold that seeped through his thin jacket. The cold was a physical thing, a predator stalking him in the silent woods. Daniel knew the odds were stacked against him. He was a city boy, more comfortable with concrete jungles than actual ones, but a primal instinct, a stubborn refusal to die, flickered to life within him. He found a piece of metal, sharp enough to use as a makeshift cup. He melted snow over a pathetic fire. He managed to start with a lighter from a dead passenger's pocket. The water was metallic and smoky, but it was life. The first day was a battle against hunger. His stomach twisted into a tight, angry knot. By the second day, pain had joined the hunger. Every muscle ached, his head throbbed, and the cold had started to burn. The third day, fear arrived. It was a silent, creeping dread that whispered of a slow, lonely death. He chewed on tree bark until his jaw was sore, the bitter taste a grim reminder of his desperation. His body was failing, but his mind was becoming the real enemy. It started playing tricks on him. He'd hear faint voices on the wind, the murmur of a conversation just out of reach. He'd catch the scent of roasting meat, so vivid he'd start to salivate, only to find nothing but snow and pine needles. He saw figures moving in the trees, shadows that danced and beckoned. Hallucinations, born of starvation and isolation. He knew they weren't real, but they felt real. The line between reality and delusion began to blur. Night was the worst. The temperature plummeted, and the cold became a physical entity, crawling under his skin, settling deep into his bones. Sleep was a tempting escape, a sweet surrender. But he knew if he fell into a deep sleep, he might never wake up. So he fought it, pacing around his meager fire, slapping his face, doing anything to stay conscious. Staying awake, however, meant being alone with his thoughts, with the phantoms that haunted the edges of his vision. It was a choice between two kinds of torture. On the fourth day, his body gave up. He was gathering firewood when his legs buckled. He collapsed into the snow, the energy completely drained from him. He lay there, staring up at the gray, indifferent sky. Tears welled in his eyes, freezing on his cheeks. This was it. This was how it ended. He was just another statistic, another soul lost to the unforgiving wilderness. He closed his eyes, ready for the end. But then, as darkness fell that night, he saw it. A faint, flickering light in the distance. He blinked, convinced it was another hallucination, his mind offering one last, cruel trick. Rescue, or just his imagination's final, desperate plea. He waited, expecting it to vanish, but it remained, a steady, unwavering pinprick. In the vast blackness, something shifted inside him. A spark. A choice. He could lie here and die, or he could move toward that light. He pushed himself up, his limbs screaming in protest. Every step was an agony. The snow was deep, and each footfall felt like lifting a mountain. He fell. He got up. If Illigan, his breath came in ragged, painful gasps. The light seemed to get no closer. It was a distant star, a taunting promise, but it was real. He had to believe it was real. He stumbled on through the night, driven by nothing but that single point of light. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shape became clearer. It wasn't a rescue party. It was a cabin, a small, abandoned hunting cabin. Hope and despair warred within him. What if it was locked? What if it was empty? There was one door, one frozen lock. He threw his shoulder against it, again and again, using the last of his strength. The wood splintered. The door swung open. Inside, it was dark and musty, but it was shelter, and on a small table, he saw a miracle, a box of emergency rations and a stack of blankets. Warmth. Food. Life. Daniel fell to the floor, the sound of his own laughter echoing in the small space. A raw, broken sound of disbelief and overwhelming relief. He spent 2 days in that cabin, slowly nursing his body back to health with stale crackers and jerky. It was the most delicious food he had ever tasted. On the 3rd day, the roar of a helicopter overhead was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. When he was rescued, the doctors called his survival impossible. They talked about the science, the calories, the core body temperature. They couldn't explain how he had made it. But Daniel knew. He called it a choice. When everything is stripped away, when you have no food, no signal, and no one, you still have a choice. Survival isn't always about being the strongest or the smartest. Sometimes, it's just about movement. It's about taking one more step, making one more decision. It's about holding on to that one chance to live. Thank you for watching. If you were inspired by this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of human resilience. Stay safe, and never underestimate the power of one more step.